What is going on, everyone? Welcome back on Block Gems. Today I want to talk about Fidenza, a collection part of the project Art Blocks Curated. You guys might remember that in the last video I also talked about Art Blocks Curated. This time I want to touch on this topic again with new metrics, new ad hoc analytics and comparisons. But before we do that, please guys, remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, because it's only thanks to your support that I can keep on building good content. So let's jump right in. In this video, I want to discuss Fidenza and some ad hoc metrics for this collection. Let's remember that unfortunately OpenSea doesn't allow us to look at collections in isolation sometimes, and for Art Blocks Curated also this is the case. You can look at metrics for the entire project, but you cannot look at metrics for specific editions or specific collections that are part of Art Blocks Curated. So here there are the crypto blocks, the dreams, the dynamics license, and all the different collections. You cannot look, for instance, at how the sales for one of these specific entries here are performing. You can just look at the general Art Blocks Curated project. So this is what I wanted to do. I want to start discussing metrics for Fidenza and compare them with metrics for Chromies which are the artworks that started Art Blocks Curated. We can find them here, and they also represent the avatar of Art Blocks Curated. So let's jump right in. If you guys remember from the last video, we mentioned that for the Chromies, so not for the Fidenza, but for the Chromies, we were looking at over 9,000 pieces that were part of that collection. And these more than 9,000 pieces, around 9,200 to be more precise, were owned just by 1,700 addresses. And the problem with that is that, so first of all, already this is not a huge number of addresses already, but also we do not know how concentrated that ownership is. So we ran that analysis, we looked at the distribution, and what we saw is that more than 10% of the supply, nearly 11%, is in the hands of just one single address. And that a handful of addresses, about the top 10 of addresses, owns nearly 40% of the overall supply of the token. This is not the same story for the Fidenza collection. We have 481 owners, or addresses to be more precise, and there are only 1,000 pieces in circulation. So already we can see that there are more addresses in proportion that own that specific token. But also, the concentration is much lower in this case. So the supply is not that concentrated, because the top owner only owns 5.6% of the overall supply. And if we can look at this visually, this is how the supply is distributed for Fidenza. It is still a power law distribution, still Pareto distributed, but it is not so uneven as it was and as it is in Chromies, where it's very dramatic how the rate of change occurs and how concentrated this supply, this ownership is. Now again, why it's important to talk about this? It is important for a matter of risk, because tokens, even NFT tokens that are extremely concentrated in supply, are, in my humble opinion, more risky. If you, for instance, look at Bitcoin, why do traders panic when the whales are transferring all their funds to the exchanges? Because they know that they can move the market. They own so much of the supply of Bitcoin that with one single sale, they can move the market and they can drop the price of Bitcoin of double digits percentage points. This is possible for them simply because they own so much of the supply. The same thing applies to NFTs. If the floor for the Chromie squiggles is at 10 Ethereum and I own 1,000 of them, I can tolerate a price drop that is probably massive before I start selling at a loss. But this is not true for the others that entered the day before yesterday. Because probably if you own 1,000 Chromie squiggles, you didn't buy them at 10 Ether. So things to keep in mind. And also because it takes less people to convince to move the market. So if one person panics and sells everything and owns a lot of them, it is much more impactful than if one person that owns just one token panics and sells everything. So there's so many aspects to consider. And coming back to the point, in Fidenza we have a much smoother distribution in this sense. Let's look at other metrics. So when it comes to floor price, we see something really, really crazy here for Fidenza. The floor price in terms not of ask price, but in terms of transaction price has been moving very, very sharply from June to today. In June, it took you 1 ETH to buy, or in the neighborhood of 1 ETH. Today, one of the last transaction prices, because the data is a few hours old now, was around 170 Ether, but more realistically now it would take you nearly 200 Ether for the entry ticket in the Fidenza space. And I wanted to look at the data in a slightly different fashion, but this is exactly the same chart, by the way. So the only thing that I'm plotting as well is the entirety of the transaction. So not only the floor transactions, but also transactions that happen above floor price. This is super interesting for one reason, because it shows that so many people have been willing to purchase way above floor price to buy the Fidenza that they wanted, to buy the token that they wanted. And this is interesting because it means that they're probably more interested in ownership, that are interested in just flipping. This is pure speculation, because it might also be that they know something that we don't, in the sense of they know that one specific characteristic of Fidenza is particularly rare, and so they're buying above floor price because they are after a specific characteristic that is extremely rare. This would be true for many collections, such as the Bored Apes, where, for instance, the ape with horns or the ape that has a cheetah skin is much more valuable than one that doesn't have it. So something to keep in mind, but for me it's particularly reassuring when I look at this token that there are so many people buying above the floor price, because it means that they really believe that the price will keep on going higher. And they're not just flippers. So, by the way, full disclosure, I do not own any Fidenza token, and I don't plan on buying any Fidenza token in the near future, not even in fractionalized terms. Now, there was one other metric that I wanted to discuss with you that is something that I've been thinking about recently, and relates to the so-called value of a collection. So, today, if we want to understand how valuable an NFT is, a single NFT is, it is not too hard, because we can look at the ask price, the bid price, and the last transaction price for that given token. And there's not so much speculation that we have to do. There might be a bit if we want to update the evaluation to current prices, and the last transaction occurred a long time ago. But in general, you just need to look at a data point. Today, if you want to buy this Chromie squiggle, it takes 9.6 Ether. Stop. That's it. But if I want to understand how valuable the Chromie squiggle as a project is, as a collection is in itself, it is much harder. So how do we get to a pseudo market cap for NFT collections? This is something that I've been thinking about. And one of the things that you could do, and of course it's not a precise metric, is you can multiply the value of the floor, the floor price, by the number of tokens in existence. So you could say that here, assume it's 10 ether for the floor, times 9,200 tokens in circulation for Chromie Squiggle, you get to 100,000 ether in pseudo market cap for this collection. For Fidenza, we are at 200. There are 1,000 of these tokens in circulation, so you are at 200,000. The reason why I believe making this kind of assessments is important is because we typically are after returns that are 10x, 100x, and they're not just 1x or 2x. If you're in NFTs, it's probably, and if you're flipping NFTs, you are probably after this kind of returns because you also know the kind of risks that you're taking. And it is a similar logic to what happens in the altcoins. And in the altcoins, the only way you have to gain these 100x returns, the only way you have is to look at microcaps. When you look at microcaps, you know that you have these potential, all this upside potential, because not so much money has been flowing into these projects already. As a means of example, if you look at Bitcoin today, Bitcoin cannot do 100x in a matter of 2, 3, 4, 5 years because there is already $1 trillion that has been pushed into Bitcoin. So that asset class will not go to 100 trillion so easily, or probably ever. We don't even know that. But it is possible that an altcoin that has a market cap of 10 million goes to 1 billion. Because there is just much less money that needs to flow into it in order for that to happen. And the same things could apply to NFTs. So if we want to look for these 100x returns, we need to apply the same logic. Is Fidenza now a micro cap in the NFT space? I would say it isn't. I would say it isn't because it has been growing so much already, but also because this sort of pseudo market cap metric that I don't even know if it's rigorous, if it's statistically correct, or if it makes sense altogether. But these kind of evaluations allow us to see that there has been so much money that has been flowing in this collection already, and the whole value of the collection would have to become dramatically higher for it to go 10x, and so much more money will have to be poured into it. Whereas maybe there are other collections, there are other projects where the 100x scenario is much more likely, merely because there is, for that to happen, much less money needs to flow into these collections. And in the next video, I want to talk about specifically the most attractive collections under these metrics, under these lenses, that we could find in the art blocks space. So guys, if you found this video informative, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.